Who knew that some fingers could cause all this trouble? Man, if only someone told Yuji that gobbling digits was gross, maybe all of this could be avoided. Who am I kidding? Sukuna would have made his way back into the world through sheer force of will. He is the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer after all. Knowing that, let's delve into the life and times of Ryomen Sukuna. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check that you're subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Early life. Over 1,000 years ago, an infant Ryomen Sukuna resided in the womb of his starving mother alongside his twin. Sukuna, not wanting to starve himself, consumed his twin, who would later reincarnate centuries down the line. As a human sorcerer, Sukuna killed many of the sorcerers from the golden age of Jujutsu. Around this time, Sukuna met Uraume and accepted them as his subordinate due to their exceptional cooking. During the Heian period, Sukuna annihilated the Northern Fujiwara clan's 5 empty generals and Sun, Moon, and Stars squad, as well as the Deshi pacification squad and the Sugawara clan's remnants using Hiten and Kamutoke. Sukuna was then invited to the harvest festival in the capital and worshipped as an idol. During the festival, Yorozu embraced him thinking he was lonely, only to be driven away by Uraume. Yorozu then expressed her wish to alleviate his loneliness, only to be slashed by him in disgust. Before his death, Sukuna was helped by Kenjaku to live on after death by splitting his soul into 20 cursed objects created from his fingers. Despite binding vows being used to preserve their existence in exchange for not doing damage, Sukuna's fingers continued to grow stronger over the millennium, eventually being designated as special grade cursed objects by Jujutsu High. Fearsome Womb Arc. One of Sukuna's fingers was kept in an outdoor thermometer box at Sugisawa High School. The school's occult club had taken the finger from the box and had tried to remove the seal placed on it. Once they had taken the seal of the finger off, other cursed spirits that the finger had drawn in attacked the club members. As Yuji Itadori and Megumi Fushiguro came in to save the club members, Yuji eats the finger in order to fight off the cursed spirits. This causes Sukuna to be incarnated into Yuji, which he is excited about. As Sukuna plans to start a massacre, he's stopped by Yuji, who reclaims his body, which surprises the cursed spirit that he's able to resist his control so easily. When Megumi plans to kill Yuji to exorcise Sukuna, Satoru Gojo shows up and decides to test out Yuji's will. Sukuna is then given control of Yuji's body and starts to attack Gojo, but Yuji manages to take back control after 10 seconds. The next day, another one of Sukuna's fingers is shown to Yuji, with Gojo explaining how there are 20 of them and they cannot be destroyed. Yuji then eats another of Sukuna's fingers and is able to still keep Sukuna under control. Days later, when Yuji is brought to the Tokyo College, Sukuna finds out that Gojo is not the leader of the sorcerers and says how he's disappointed. Sukuna also tells Gojo that he will kill Gojo first when he takes over Yuji's body for not killing Yuji right away. As Gojo says that it's an honor to be targeted by Sukuna, Gojo then explains who Sukuna is to a curious Yuji. During an investigation at a detention center, Sukuna is forcefully given control of Yuji's body to combat a special grade cursed spirit before it kills them. Instead of taking on the spirit, Sukuna decides to fight with the spirit in order to take out Megumi. When the spirit starts to attack Sukuna, Sukuna easily blocks the attacks and overwhelms the spirit. Sukuna then decides to teach the spirit a lesson and uses his domain expansion to easily cut the spirit into pieces. Sukuna then takes back his finger, which causes the spirit to die. Sukuna is prepared for Yuji to take back control, telling him to switch already, but when nothing happens, he eerily smiles, realizing he can't. Sukuna meets up with Megumi outside of the detention center and removes Yuji's heart so that Yuji won't be able to switch with him. Sukuna then eats the finger that he had just got from the special grade cursed spirit and plans on killing Megumi. Sukuna and Megumi start to fight, where Sukuna easily defeats some of Megumi's Shikigami, though he's impressed by the skill in which he utilizes them. Sukuna manages to push Megumi into a corner, questioning him on why he focused on fleeing, which confuses Megumi. Nonetheless, Megumi decides to fight seriously, which greatly enthuses Sukuna, but before the fight can continue, Yuji regains control from Sukuna, which results in Yuji's death. After Yuji has died, Sukuna and Yuji start to fight one another within Sukuna's territory. Sukuna easily overpowers Yuji after restraining him, and he tells him that they're not dead yet. Sukuna proposes that he bring Yuji back to life, with the condition that he'll be able to take complete control of his body for a minute, but also swearing that he won't harm any of his friends when he does. Yuji rejects this and tells him to revive him, so Sukuna proposes that they fight and the winner gets their deal. Yuji accepts, but Sukuna immediately defeats him. Yuji is subsequently revived, aware that Sukuna is responsible, though with no memory of the deal he made with them. Versus Mahito Arc. One of Sukuna's fingers was placed in Junpei Yoshino's home, which resulted in Junpei's mother, Nagi Yoshino's death. Mahito then shows Junpei the finger and explains how it draws in cursed spirits. Mahito also managed to convince Junpei that it was one of his classmates who was responsible, even though it was in fact Mahito and Geto. When Junpei slowly dies from Mahito using his idol transfiguration on him, Yuji desperately asks Sukuna for help in saving Junpei, but Sukuna sadistically refuses and mocks Yuji for relying on him when things get tough. Sukuna and Mahito then laugh at Yuji for being unable to save Junpei from his cruel fate. This would result in an enraged Yuji trying to finish off Mahito and avenge Junpei's death. During the fight, Mahito tries to attack Yuji with his idol transfiguration, but Sukuna appears, warning Mahito not to touch his soul again and forces the curse out of his territory. However, Mahito taps into Sukuna's again upon witnessing Yuji breaking into his domain to help Kento Nanami. Sukuna senses that Mahito has touched his soul again and brutally wounds him for attempting to mess with him. Sukuna's finger is then collected and brought back to the college. Kyoto Goodwill Event Arc. The fingers that are at the Tokyo College are collected, along with the Deathpainting Wombs 1-3 by Mahito. Deathpainting Arc. After Sukuna was incarnated, the finger at Yasuhachi Bridge awakens and starts to kill people. Megami manages to defeat the spirit that has Sukuna's finger and retrieve it, which Sukuna is glad that Megami was able to get stronger. After Yuji and Nobara Kukisaki reunite with Megami, Sukuna creates a mouth on Yuji's palm and eats the finger when Megami gives it to Yuji. Days later, Sukuna taunts Yuji about how his awakening is killing people because he had eaten one of his fingers, which Yuji simply tells Sukuna not to tell Megami. Shibuya Incident Arc. As the Shibuya incident occurs, Gojo is sealed in Prison Realm by Pseudo Geto, and the next step for the cursed spirits is to deal with Yuji and Sukuna. Mahito and Choso want to kill Yuji for their own reasons, but Jogo wants to release Sukuna. They decide to make it a game to see who succeeds in their goal. After Yuji's fight against Choso, Sukuna comments on how pathetic it was that Yuji could have lost to an inferior opponent, but is surprised when he suddenly stumbles away, sparing his life and leaving him unconscious. Right after this, Suguro Geto's subordinates, Nanako and Mimiko Hasaba, approach Yuji and force-feed him one of Sukuna's fingers they had collected. Jogo then appears behind them, scaring them away, proceeding to force-feed him the 10 fingers they had collected, bringing the total Yuji had ingested to 15. While Jogo still has his fingers around Yuji's neck, Sukuna takes control, demanding the cursed spirit to take them off. He commands the three to kneel before them and cuts the top off of Jogo's head when he only takes a knee. Sukuna asks Nanako and Mimiko what they want with him, giving them 1 finger's worth of time. They ask him to kill the imposter possessing Geto, but he simply kills the both of them as he doesn't like them ordering him around. Sukuna then asks Jogo, but Jogo says that he wants nothing and explains that he just wants Sukuna to be fully revived. Jogo explains how Yuji can't control right now and advises that Sukuna make a binding vow to permanently take control, but Sukuna rejects it since he has other plans. Out of appreciation for the fingers, Sukuna then makes a deal with Jogo. If he can land a hit on him, then he will kill everyone in Shibuya -1, which Jogo agrees to. Sukuna then fights Jogo and completely overwhelms him. Sukuna taunts Jogo while easily dodging all of his attacks. As Jogo uses his maximum meteor attack, Sukuna notices several sorcerers and curse users on the ground preparing to flee. He suddenly appears before them and forces them all to stay put until he gives the signal. They all stand around fearing for their lives as the attack gets closer before Sukuna eventually allows them to move right as the attack lands. Jogo thinks he's succeeded, but Sukuna easily comes out of it unscathed. Sukuna wonders why Jogo is not using his domain, which Jogo says his domain would lose. As things get interesting, Sukuna starts to use fire-based attacks, much to Jogo's confusion. Sukuna prepares to continue his fight with Jogo and subsequently defeats him. As Jogo is dying, Sukuna meets with him and explains how it was stupid for Jogo trying to be like the humans. As Jogo agrees with him, Sukuna also explains how he had fun fighting Jogo, and that he should be proud because he was strong. Jogo starts to cry and wonders what it is, which Sukuna says he doesn't know. Suddenly, someone shows up to escort Sukuna, which he wonders who they are, only to recognize the person as Uraume. Suddenly, Sukuna senses that Megami has summoned a powerful Shikigami, and tells Uraume that he has something to do. Sukuna tells Uraume that it won't be long until he's completely free, and that they shouldn't neglect their preparations. He bids them farewell and leaves. Sukuna quickly arrives at the Shikigami's location and saves the sorcerer that was facing off against Megami. Sukuna notices the situation and thinks about how it was a good idea to save them since his death would result in Megami's death as well. Sukuna heals Megami and tells him not to die yet since there's something else he needs him to do. Sukuna thinks about how he'll defeat the Shikigami and how that would void the ritual since he's an outsider. Sukuna then prepares to face the Shikigami. Mahoraga attacks with its sword, which Sukuna manages to block. Sukuna then wounds Mahoraga with his technique and figures that Mahoraga's sword is capable of exercising any spirit since it uses positive energy. Mahoraga heals itself, which Sukuna attacks again, but Mahoraga manages to counter. Sukuna figures that Mahoraga is capable of seeing his technique. Mahoraga attacks, which Sukuna tries to block, but he's sent flying. Mahoraga attacks again, but Sukuna dodges and wounds Mahoraga. Mahoraga heals itself again, which Sukuna figures out that Mahoraga's ability is to adapt to any and all phenomena. Sukuna thinks about how this is what Megami was trying to summon during their last fight, and that Mahoraga would have killed him. Sukuna then activates his domain, Malevolent Shrine, and uses its effect to cut up everything within a certain distance. While this is happening, Sukuna thinks about how to use his ability to defeat Mahoraga. When Mahoraga starts to heal, Sukuna uses a different ability to defeat Mahoraga. Sukuna starts to leave and tells Megami's attacker to leave, in which the attacker runs into Sukuna's domain and dies. Realizing he's about to lose control of the body of Yuji, Sukuna quickly takes Megami to get medical treatment and leaves. Returning back to the location where he had fought Mahoraga, Sukuna tells Yuji to take a look at the destruction he caused, as Yuji takes back control, horrified by it all. As Kenjaku unseals all cursed objects and starts the culling games, the finger sealed within Yuji Itadori at birth is unsealed and taken in by Sukuna. Itadori's Extermination Arc. In the aftermath of the Shibuya Incident, following Gojo's concealment and Pseudo-Geto's escape, Yuji's execution by the Jujutsu higher-ups is reinstated, with his executioner chosen to be Yuta Okotsu. He confronts Yuji on the streets, who's been trying to clean up curses with Chozo, and proceeds to fight him. Using Rika, Yuta is successfully able to gain the upper hand and stabs Yuji in the chest. Sukuna is initially taken aback, annoyed that he's been killed, only to sense something else going on, and eerily smiles. As it turns out, Yuta had been asked by Gojo to help Yuji, and temporarily killed him to get out of his binding vow with the higher-ups, using his reverse curse technique to promptly heal him. Culling Game Arc. As everyone is in the midst of dealing with the culling game, Yuji and Megami seek out Hanakurusu in hopes of using her curse technique to free Gojo from the prison realm. They succeed in finding her, but her symbiotic partner, Angel, tells them that first they have to track down and eliminate the disgraced one. In private, Sukuna reveals to Yuji that he is the disgraced one they're referring to, causing a problem for him and Megami. After Master Tengen becomes compromised by Kenjaku, Yuji and Megami begin their attempted counterplan, starting with rescuing the latter's sister, Sumiki, from having to participate in the game by giving her points. However, right after doing so, she uses her points to allow people to freely travel through colonies, revealing herself to actually be a reincarnated sorcerer known as Yorozu, leaving Megami completely speechless. She flies away, intending to fight Sukuna, but before anyone can react, Sukuna activates his in-chain binding vow with Yuji, granting him complete control of the body without being able to harm anyone for a full minute. He quickly knocks Hana unconscious and, taking a gamble, rips off one of Yuji's fingers. Sukuna laughs maniacally, realizing that Yuji didn't take himself into account on who he couldn't harm, and before Megami can do anything, he chokes him out, force-feeding him the finger and transferring his consciousness into Megami. Yuji wakes up, shocked to see Sukuna now in complete control of Megami. Sukuna punches Yuji, causing him to spit blood and fly through several buildings. He spots Maki and Takaba noticing what just happened, and comments that no matter what era he's in, insects always appear out of nowhere. He uses Megami's 10 Shadows technique to summon a huge and demonic version of Nue, which drops massive lightning bolts on Maki and Takaba. While Sukuna is not paying attention, Hana sneaks up behind him and attacks him with her curse technique, which burns Sukuna and causes his skin to tear, while she activates Jacob's ladder, leading him to be hit by a massive beam of light. As he screams in pain, Hana shouts to Sukuna to bring Megami back because he belongs to her. Suddenly, Sukuna's tattoo on Megami starts to fade, and he speaks to Hana in a charming voice, saying that everything is fine and invites her for a hug. Hana listens and lets down her guard, accepting Megami's request despite Angel's warnings. Sure enough, Sukuna was merely pretending to be Megami and uses the opportunity to bite down hard, calling her a stupid person and dropping her towards the ground. Just then, Yuji reappears, jumping off the ground and landing on a building next to Sukuna, causing him to mockingly comment that Yuji is still alive. Yuji jumps off of the building with so much force that the roof of the building is destroyed. Sukuna is shocked by Yuji's sudden increase in strength, and they both grab each other by the neck and fall off the building. They both land on the ground unharmed as Yuji kicks a huge rock towards Sukuna, which he tries to stop, only for Yuji to grab another and smash it on his back. However, the attack had no effect on Sukuna, who kicks Yuji in the face, trying to understand how Yuji had been able to take so much punishment, commenting on how twisted Kenjaku is, having deduced something in regards to the two's familiar relationship. Yuji yells at Sukuna, asking him why he and his allies can't just live a normal life without causing harm to others, but Sukuna cuts Yuji's shoulder with dismantle, asking Yuji why such weak creatures cling to life so fiercely, comparing humans to insects and saying that creatures that fall apart at a touch can never be happy, and they should just swallow the suffering that life causes them. Yuji realizes from Sukuna's words that Sukuna and his allies are curses and always will be, so he stands up and asks Sukuna if he can swallow his suffering. Sukuna tells Yuji to try, and he begins to beat Yuji relentlessly with cleave, but to his shock, Yuji keeps moving despite Sukuna's attacks. Sukuna at first wonders how Yuji is so sturdy, and then realizes his cursed energy output is dropping because of Megami, cursing him as Yuji is able to land a punch directly on Sukuna. Sukuna realizes that due to Megami's influence on his cursed energy dropping, he won't have access to 10% of his maximum power, but since Megami is unable to affect the control over the body, Sukuna is confident the power he currently has will be more than enough to comfortably kill Yuji. As he gets ready to fight again, he suddenly notices Maki's presence and realizes that Nue's haphazard attack didn't do any damage to her, and that she is not a small fry like he assumed. Yuji and Maki proceed to attack Sukuna at the same time, but Sukuna handles both of them very efficiently, keeping the fight at a stalemate. Eventually, Uraume interrupts the battle and uses Frost Calm on Yuji and Maki to freeze them completely. Sukuna praises Uraume on their achievement, summoning Nue to fly them over towards the bath. Yuji manages to break free from the ice and calls it to Sukuna, but he and Uraume just look down on him, making fun of his face as they laugh and fly away. Sukuna proceeds to take a bath set up for him by Uraume and Kenjaku, submerging himself in curses and other evils in order to completely submerge Megami's soul, granting him full control of his body and cursed energy. Realizing he's not fully submerged, Sukuna decides to go and kill Yorozu, because if he can kill Megami's sister, he knows it will completely drive Megami into despair. He arrives in Sendai, where he swiftly kills Ryo Ishigori, who had attempted to confront him, complimenting his toughness. He then confronts Yorozu, who'd been waiting for him, all for her desire to get him to accept her love. After a mostly one-sided battle, Sukuna kills Yorozu using the 10 shadows, and also killing Sumiki Fushiguro, and in a way that made it seem like Megami killed his sister, because he used his curse technique, making Megami's soul sink deeper into the abyss and strengthening control over his body. Sometime after his fight with Yorozu, Sukuna blocks an attack from Gojo Satoru that was meant to kill Kenjaku, and the two agree to a duel on December 24th. After this exchange, Sukuna eats the rest of his fingers that were given to him by Uraume, and he replaces the final finger with his mummified real body from the Heian area while commenting on how ironic it is to Tengen. Shinjuku Showdown Arc. On December 24th, Sukuna briefly had a conversation with Uraume regarding why Yuji had traces of his soul. Sukuna revealed to them that Yuji was not only Kenjaku's child, but also the son of his other half, and reiterated that the boy had one of his fingers sealed in him upon his birth. Afterwards, Sukuna engaged in battle with Satoru Gojo. The battle starts with Satoru hitting Sukuna with a 200% powered hollow purple, burning off his arm. Trading insults on the challenger of the fight, Sukuna and Gojo begin the fight by warming up, Gojo throwing Sukuna around with blue, and Sukuna responding by cutting a building nearby Gojo before they cause a lot of collateral damage upon clashing attacks, to which he comes out unscathed. Eventually, both Gojo and Sukuna open their domain expansions, Unlimited Void clashing with Malevolent Shrine. While the two domains prove equally strong and refined, Malevolent Shrine's range of attack reaches even beyond Gojo's barrier, and is able to effectively destroy Gojo's barrier, immediately causing the Malevolent Shrine's sure hit effect to slash Gojo's neck. Gojo survives by healing himself using reverse curse technique, but as Malevolent Shrine keeps attacking Gojo, he's forced to focus his full output on reverse curse technique as he's slashed all over his body. Gojo tries to run away from Malevolent Shrine's range, but Sukuna quickly starts engaging him again, with Gojo just managing to fend off the King of Curses as he notices that the center of Malevolent Shrine is Sukuna himself, and not the shrine. Gojo uses new Shadow Style Simple Domain to counter Malevolent Shrine's effects, buying him the time to properly heal the cuts he received. But as the Simple Domain is quickly torn apart, Gojo stops healing himself and uses Simple Domain to fight off Sukuna long enough to use Reverse Curse Technique to replenish his burned out Curse Technique. He quickly latches himself onto Sukuna and uses Red, sending him flying into the shrine as he fully heals himself. Sukuna then gets taunted by Gojo to use his maximum range, as he stands a few meters outside of the range of Malevolent Shrine. As Sukuna immediately grants Gojo his wish, Gojo opened his domain once again, this time reversing the outer and inner conditions of his domain barrier barrier to make Unlimited Void's outer shell strong against attacks from the outside. They engage in hand-to-hand combat, with Sukuna using domain amplification at higher output than before, but Gojo quickly notices that the effect of Malevolent Shrine was turned off within his barrier, along with realizing that Sukuna had focused the full strength of his sure hit effect on the outside while he engaged Gojo in close range to avoid the sure hit of Gojo's domain, countering the now strong barrier, allowing him to once more shatter Gojo's domain. However, now prepared for such a scenario, Gojo immediately activates Falling Blossom Emotion to defend himself, and is able to weaken the slashes of Malevolent Shrine, as he muses on how he learned it as a child, and while he didn't need to use it after mastering his domain, before he then expands his domain once more, at first enlarging the barrier to encompass all of Sukuna's range, before he then shrinks the barrier to a size smaller than a basketball using his experience in the prison realm. Although Sukuna responded by reducing Malevolent Shrine's range to increase his curse technique's output, this time Gojo's reinforced outer shell proved able to withstand Malevolent Shrine long enough to injure Sukuna to the point he wasn't able to maintain his domain, collapsing Malevolent Shrine as well. However, despite finally getting back at the King of Curses, Gojo starts to consider Sukuna's lack of usage of the 10 shadows inside Unlimited Void, specifically Maharaga, although he soon gets a nosebleed and starts to feel dizzy. Still, both of them activate their domain, and yet again, Gojo proves to be stronger in fighting inside a domain as he injures Sukuna's face, and both Sukuna and Gojo's domain breaks at the same time. The next time they open their domain, Gojo was able to cast his slightly faster than Sukuna to hit Sukuna with Unlimited Void for just 0.01 seconds, which weakened Sukuna and Malevolent Shrine, allowing Gojo to finally overpower Sukuna's domain decisively and shatter it, fully exposing Sukuna to Unlimited Void. To capture Sukuna, Gojo aims to destroy not only Sukuna's heart, but also his lungs and liver, in order to effectively incapacitate him by bringing him closer to death than Yuji was at the juvenile detention center. However, Sukuna manages to summon Maharaga, and Maharaga reveals it's adapted to his domain, as Gojo fails to destroy it in one shot using red. Stunned, Gojo analyzes the situation and realizes that Sukuna had used Megami's soul to bear the burden of adaptation for Maharaga. The strain of healing his burned out curse technique catches up to Gojo as his nose bleeds and he collapses due to essentially having burned out the right prefrontal cortex and then healing it, leaving him unable to open his domain to one-shot Maharaga. Sukuna had also sustained a similar degree of damage to his brain due to taking Unlimited Void just briefly, leaving them both in the situation where they could not use their domain expansion. Gojo taunts Sukuna before he and Sukuna engage in the second round of their fight, Gojo opening the next round by striking Sukuna using blue. As the fight continues, Gojo uses blue to manipulate the environment against Sukuna as he tries to land decisive blows using hand-to-hand combat, but Sukuna is able to keep up with him and use domain amplification to force him back. Unfazed, Gojo deduces domain amplification blocks out Maharaga's adaptation, and after a brief exchange, he deduces Maharaga needs 3 more spins to adapt. Confidently declaring that he will kill Sukuna before that happens, Gojo starts to intensify the rhythm as he begins to take a visible advantage, using blue in various ways and managing to land some effective shots in hand-to-hand combat before using red. Even though Sukuna uses domain amplification to neutralize the output, Gojo, already anticipating it, has red circle around the building's layout to catch Sukuna off guard and have it explode on his back. This allows Gojo to land a black flash that actually knocks Sukuna out, causing Maharaga's wheel to fall, only for Maharaga's wheel to still spin, and the Shikigami is summoned to slash at Gojo's chest. Despite the presence of Maharaga and his dwindling cursed energy output, however, realizing that he hasn't actually guaranteed to win this fight only made Gojo more determined as he recalls Toji. He manages to stun Maharaga, but before he could launch a full-charged red, Sukuna regains consciousness and uses Rabbit Escape to make him miss his aim. As he engages Maharaga, he withstands Sukuna's Max Elephant, mimicking Piercing Blood, realizing that Sukuna is now freely using the 10 shadows as Maharaga can now pierce through his infinity. Sukuna summons Fusion Beast Agito to make the fight 3-on-1. Although outnumbered, Gojo manages to avoid Maharaga and Agito's attacks while also reacting to Sukuna's attempt to surprise him before launching red. But it proves inefficient, with Gojo's output weakened and Maharaga having begun to adapt to it. Gojo realizes he has to take out Maharaga in one shot, even though he will require some time to charge up his unlimited hollow technique, and his opponents are trying to disrupt the process. He manages to deliver attacks on Agito, even ripping its tail off with a black flash, but it quickly regenerates as Gojo realizes Agito combines the power of Round Deer, Morning Tiger, Great Serpent, and Nue, which means he has to destroy it in one shot due to its reverse curse technique, meaning that it can not only heal himself, himself, but also Sukuna. However, as Gojo focused on Ajito, Mahoraga channels Sukuna's curse technique to cut off his right arm, and Sukuna alongside Mahoraga briefly pummels Gojo, but Gojo, having had enough of Ajito, unleashes blue at maximum output to crush Ajito completely. Performing 2 black flashes allows Gojo to sharpen his output back and regain his arm, and after landing 2 more black flashes on Mahoraga, he proceeds to chant incantations to power up red further. But rather than aiming it at Sukuna, Gojo aims the curse technique reversal above it to fuse with the previous maximum output blue that crushed Ajito. He manages to intercept Mahoraga's attempts to cancel out blue through blue's high-speed movement, and though Sukuna attempts to launch piercing blood, Satoru simply chants a few more incantations that greatly amplifies blue's power, allowing it to absorb piercing water as it fuses with red. The strengthened purple destroys Mahoraga and a major part of Shinjuku in a massive explosion of cursed energy, while critically injuring both Gojo and Sukuna and tearing off one of the latter's hands. As the battle continues, Sukuna slices through Gojo's arms and torso, defeating and killing Gojo by cutting into the space, though he congratulated him for his efforts. Afterwards, Hajime Kashimo runs to engage in combat with Sukuna as he comments for him not to disappoint. As he battles Kashimo, he reveals Yorozu's gift to him, the Kamutoke, a cursed tool that discharges electricity. However, this proves ineffective against Kashimo due to his innate resistance to electricity. As the fight progresses, Sukuna eventually gets overpowered by him due to the release of his cursed technique, forcing Sukuna to resume his transformation into his true incarnated form, in the process healing all the physical injuries he received during his fight with Gojo. Sukuna then proceeds to easily overpower Kashimo, beating him down with his 4 arms. He then begins chanting to use Dismantle, and Kashimo comments that this is the same slash that finished off Satoru Gojo. It was the slash that cut the world. Sukuna mentions that a fool once preached to him about love, and that she claimed that he didn't know love. Sukuna says that she could have done better preaching to Kashimo or Gojo, although Sukuna says there's not much they can understand. He asks if Kashimo is strong and begins repeatedly punching him again. As Kashimo gets blown away by Sukuna's attacks, Sukuna then sends a wave of his slashing attacks shaped like a grid to cut down Kashimo, killing him. After his fight with Kashimo, Sukuna sees Yuji and Higuruma jump down from the sky, ready to fight him. Suddenly, Meimei's crows attack him, but are easily killed with the Kamutoke. This was a distraction, however, as Higuruma smashes his gavel on the ground as Sukuna dodges it. Yuji begins to attack him with a flurry of punches, but gets easily blocked. He punches Sukuna one more time with his enhanced arm, surprising him. Higuruma then uses his domain expansion. Itadori says to redo his original trial, but with Sukuna involved and that he can be prosecuted for the slaughter in Shibuya. Higuruma, however, says that his domain expansion's 3 tiers are random, but if he requests for a crime already adjudicated and includes Sukuna as a co-defendant, it isn't impossible to continue the trial for the same crime. As the sentence continues, Judge Man accuses Yuji for the mass murder in Shibuya. However, Higuruma states that he didn't kill anyone, and that his previous confession in high court was false, which was motivated by a strong sense of personal accountability. He then states that the real culprit was Sukuna. He also stated that Judge Man has knowledge of everything about the individuals within his domain. However, apart from the evidence in his envelope, none of it was shared with him. It's also revealed that the evidence given by Judge Man concerned Sukuna even when he was inside of Yuji, just like the previous trials did, since the details and facts surrounding him taking over Yuji's body, along with his actions, were well documented. The massacre in Shibuya was only possible because of Sukuna's immense skill in Jujutsu. As long as Sukuna isn't charged at the time of the incident, or to have a mental deterioration such that he can no longer be charged criminally, they should be able to secure a death sentence with the evidence. Sukuna interrupts Higuruma, stating that the evidence was not necessary and tells the lawyer to not be so long-winded. Sukuna replies that he already knew the rules of the domain when he was inside of Yuji. He also states his interest in the Executioner's Sword. He says that he didn't care less about his actions or when he did them and tells him to hurry up. Judge Man then charges Sukuna guilty with confiscation and the death penalty. After the verdict, Sukuna begins fighting with Higuruma and Yuji along with the sorcerers Takuma, Kusakabe, and Chozo. Sukuna muses to himself about the growth of these sorcerers' cursed energy and decides to pick up the pace. Sukuna begins impaling Chozo's torso, kicks away Takuma, and throws Higuruma into the debris, fascinated with Higuruma's growth in particular. Sukuna, now greatly impressed with Higuruma's cursed amplification, acknowledges the sorcerer and continues the fight, dispatching Yuji again, writing him off as boring. Sukuna then uses Dismantle to cut off both of Higuruma's arms, testing if the sorcerer can use reverse curse technique. Sukuna then deflects a ranged blood manipulation technique from Chozo, realizing he must still be alive. Higuruma then heals his arm to strike Sukuna with the Executioner's Sword, only for Sukuna to cut off one of his hands before the technique could work on him, then striking Higuruma with a lethal blow. Before he passed on, Higuruma tosses the last of the Executioner's Sword to Yuji, entrusting him to defeat Sukuna. The Executioner's Sword, however, failed to work due to Higuruma's death. He then slashes Yuji away before noticing two sorcerers taking Higuruma's body and teleporting away. Sukuna sees this and comes to the conclusion that this teleportation technique was likely the reason why Gojo's corpse disappeared earlier, realizing the possibility that their wounded might be being transported to Shoko Ieri. He then brushes off this idea due to knowing her reverse curse technique is weaker than his and Gojo's, and deduces that Yuji has also managed to learn reverse curse technique in only a month, evident by his injuries being healed. Sukuna then gets lost in thought with vague feelings of irritation and non-satisfaction and decides to utilize Kenjaku's backup plan to activate the merger with Tengen and humanity to completely crush the sorcerer's ideals, just as Yuta Okotsu and Rika arrive to the sorcerer's aid. Yuta and Rika engage in combat with Sukuna, with Yuta then deciding to act on his own plan, activating his domain Authentic Mutual Love, forcing Sukuna to use Hollow Wicker Basket to avoid being hit by the domain's can't miss attack, which he deduces is Angel's technique. Sukuna deduces that while Yuta attempts to wear him down, Yuji will then deliver a blow to forcibly separate him from Megami's body, with him finding their roles amusing. Sukuna then goes back on the offensive, fighting the three, thinking to himself on how he can't use his domain or his full reverse curse technique output as Rika throws Yuji at Sukuna. He figures out that Yuji and Yuta are targeting the boundary of his and Megami's soul to separate them. Yuta then uses Thin Icebreaker, launching Sukuna at Rika, who then lands another blow, knocking him into the rubble. Sukuna retaliates with a volley of slashes at both Yuji and Yuta, and then kicks Rika and cuts off her fingers. Sukuna notices that Yuji and Yuta have both healed themselves and notes on how their cursed energy output has grown significantly, prompting him to ask what they've been up to for the past month, with Yuta claiming he cheated while Yuji states it was through hard work. Yuta then fulfills the conditions for ink and predicts Sukuna's next move to counter it. Afterwards, it's then revealed that Yuta had also copied Sukuna's very own technique, Cleave, and uses it on him, shocking Sukuna. Sukuna realizes that Rika must have ate his last remaining finger and is then struck repeatedly by Yuji. Sukuna swiftly retaliates with slashes to the boy's chest, causing Yuji to spit up blood in his face. Yuta, Rika, and Yuji then apply more pressure, causing Sukuna to begin dropping his Hollow Wicker Basket in an attempt to use the world-cutting slash. Yuta, however, realized what he was about to do. While Rika and Yuji held his arms, Yuta went to tear out his second tongue. Sukuna used a slash on Yuta, but they were significantly more weakened. Yuji spat up blood, then erupted onto his face, and his fourth arm was cut, allowing the domain to activate Jacob's Ladder. Yuji was then able to access the barrier of Megami and Sukuna's soul, only to learn that Megami had lost his will to live. Sukuna, using this chance, unleashes yet another world-cutting slash, slicing straight through Yuta and Rika while also severely cutting through Yuji. Though while he was distracted, Maki Zenin entered the domain to stab through Sukuna with the Split Soul Katana. After Yuji was transported back to HQ by Ui, Sukuna set his sights on Maki as the two engaged in battle. Maki appeared to get the upper hand on Sukuna, avoiding his attacks and even tossing him into debris. He then decided to launch a world-cutting slash that was also dodged by her. Sukuna noted to himself that, like Maharaga, Maki could read his attacks better than other sorcerers. She then commented on how Sukuna was relying on cursed energy to keep his heart beating, and if he could keep that up during their fight. Sukuna bluntly told her it would be no trouble as he prepared to unleash more havoc. Sukuna began to fight her once more, slashing through more debris and tossing cars at Maki, who then dodged them. Sukuna then sends a slash at Maki, sending her into a building. Sukuna then spotted Takuma attempting to attack him, proceeding to slash and kick the sorcerer away. Sukuna then realized that Takuma didn't have Nanami's cursed tool on him and blocked Kusakabe, who attempted to strike him from above. Maki then caught up to him and launched Sukuna into another building, using the force of her weight to push him back. She then kicked apart columns towards him. However, Sukuna manages to grab a hold of her face, cleaving off a part of it, commenting on how she wasn't like Yuji and became fascinated with Maki's heavenly restricted body that defied the basis of Jujutsu. He proceeded to explain the basis of Jujutsu and how her existence defied it, then congratulating her on being the first person to give him something to prove. Whether one's Jujutsu or their body was more worth honing. Sukuna then hit Maki in the chest with a black flash, sending her away while awaiting a fight with Kusakabe. Sukuna then became curious of Kusakabe's sword drawing and threw multiple slashes that were intercepted by the sorcerer, with Sukuna being notably impressed on his reflexes. Sukuna then activated a slash without using any hand signs that were narrowly avoided, mockingly declaring that the next one would hit Kusakabe. Kusakabe then expanded his simple domain to pile on multiple attacks on Sukuna. As the two brawled, Kusakabe attempted to use Hazy Moon to pierce the King of Curse's heart, but the blade was easily caught before it could land. Sukuna then slashed through Kusakabe, ultimately defeating him, but grew quickly annoyed at Ui, who attempted to teleport yet another defeated sorcerer, deciding to kill the boy on the spot. However, Miguel arrived in that time to save the young sorcerer, leaving Sukuna clueless as to who he was. Sukuna notes that Miguel, and namely LaRue, are why Ui was saved in time and engaged in battle with the two, slashing through LaRue's heart catch while throwing slashes at Miguel, only only for them to be dodged. Sukuna notes LaRue's technique is not that special, but is intrigued by Miguel's innate technique, Prayer Song. As they continue to fight, Sukuna spots a piercing blood attack from Chozo and dodges it, retaliating with a slash at his arms. Yuji then drops down on Sukuna, forcing his attention to him now, only for one of his arms to be cut off by a recovered Maki. As Yuji charges toward him, Sukuna strikes LaRue with his second black flash, seemingly recovering his reverse curse technique usage. Sukuna then turned his attention back to Chozo, Yuji, and Maki, whereupon fighting Maki, launched his third black flash onto her. Chozo attempted to launch a supernova on Sukuna, who then managed to move faster than his own flying slashes, hitting Chozo with his fourth black flash, who then managed to reduce some of the damage with his blood armor. Yuji rejoined the battle and separated Sukuna from Chozo, taking over the fight. Yuji then used piercing blood for the first time on Sukuna. Yuji then readied himself to launch his own black flash on Sukuna. At the same time, LaRue activated Cutie Honey on Sukuna's heart, which forced him into keeping his eyes on LaRue long enough to allow Yuji to strike the King of Curses with a black flash. Sukuna then prepared to fight Yuji one-on-one, but was struck with another black flash from the boy. In return, Sukuna retaliated and landed his fifth black flash. After gaining some distance, he was able to confirm that Yuji indeed possessed both blood manipulation as well as the King of Curses' own curse technique, Shrine, seeing him use it for the first time. After striking Yuji with a slash, he was hit by another black flash from the boy, thinking to himself that while the output of the newly awakened technique is low and overall inferior, therefore a non-issue, the soul punching was a problem. At the same time, Sukuna was hit by Takuma Ino's Ryu, but made quick work of the beast and subdued Ino. Yuji took this opportunity to hit him again with Black Flash, which led Sukuna to question if the boy was trying to equal him. Sukuna retaliated with a blunt force and slash attack combo, but realized it didn't phase Yuji, who then proceeded to hit Sukuna with another 2 black flashes. Sukuna grew furious with the boy, but he was briefly distracted due to the 7-3 curse tool that Ino managed to land on him, allowing for Yuji to land yet another black flash on the King of Curses. Due to the 7 black flashes that Yuji landed on Sukuna, he was able to recover reverse curse technique. However, the previous black flashes that Sukuna landed did enable him to recover a previously lost technique. With his back against the wall, Sukuna activated an incomplete version of Malevolent Shrine, with an open barrier that would only last for about 99 seconds. As the slashes piled onto the sorcerers in the area, they were able to bear the brunt of its sure hit effect with simple domain. However, after the domain's collapse, Sukuna activated Divine Flame. Due to various binding vows Sukuna placed on himself to maximize Divine Flame's speed and range, the conditions being that it can only be used when he isn't outnumbered and only within his domain, Sukuna was allowed to expand his flames and overall curse energy to incinerate every living thing within his domain, with Divine Flame's heat resulting in decompression and overpressure within the domain that would cause incineration like with Maharaga in Shibuya. This plan would be his surefire way of killing everyone in the domain. Yuji, however, was saved due to Chozo's efforts at the cost of his own life. After the domain ceased and his curse techniques being exhausted following, Sukuna goes to confront Yuji, who is now backed up by Ai Todo. Sukuna recognized that Todo's technique activation with a Vibra Slap had changed and improved the technique in allowing for 50 swaps per second. Yuji and Todo used this to their advantage to strike at him. Sukuna thought to himself that out of every sorcerer, Todo was the most difficult to deal with given his personality, admitting that he appeared to fight him at the worst time. Sukuna leapt into the air, but was position swapped once more, allowing for Yuji to dropkick him. Sukuna then attempted to throw the boy, but their positions were swapped again, allowing for Yuji to land more blows. Sukuna accepted that due to Todo's control of swapping as much and as little as he wanted, it would be impossible to adapt, deciding to instead wait for the one moment where the swapping would be obvious. Sukuna assumed that at the height of Yuji's focus, Todo would bluff a boogie woogie swap at that moment, with Sukuna preparing to strike the boy after his bluff. However, at the same time Mei's crow appeared in his vicinity, realizing that he misread the situation, Sukuna attempted to attack at the crow's position before it could be swapped. In actuality, Sukuna had taken Todo's bait, as the crow was merely there to trick the King of Curses into assuming a swap, allowing Yuji to hit him with a black flash. As Yuji's fingers pierced through his chest, Sukuna attempted to activate his domain, only to be interrupted and caught off guard by someone else. To his shock, the figure that appeared before him was the strongest sorcerer of modern day who he had slain earlier, Satoru Gojo. However, upon seeing the stitches pattern upon his head, he realized that it was actually Yuta Okotsu, who had taken possession of Gojo's body. Sukuna grew ecstatic and punched Yuji aside, greatly impressed Yuta would go so far. He proceeded to activate Malevolent Shrine once more, while Yuta activated Unlimited Void. Yuta encloses Malevolent Shrine within a shrunken barrier akin to Gojo to hold off the effects for the next 3 minutes. To counteract this, Sukuna removed his 99-second time limit by restricting his domain's range to the outline of Yuta's domain. Sukuna then thinks to himself that he will destroy Unlimited Void, expand Malevolent Shrine again, and kill everyone within range in all less than 3 minutes. Yuta attempts to pull Sukuna in with blue, but the King of Curses blindsides him by activating Domain Amplification to bypass Infinity, proceeding to restrain Yuta's arms and strike him in the face. Sukuna muses to himself that this information won't be disclosed to the sorcerers outside since Meimei's crows can't enter the domain. Sukuna was then kicked away and they continued fighting, but the King of Curses realized Yuta's attacks were not connecting and his blue technique misfired. Realizing Yuta was having trouble controlling Limitless, Sukuna fought back and recalled what Kenjaku told him of Yuta's curse technique copy, and how its activation hinged on Rika consuming a part of the technique's target. Due to her not being with Yuta, Sukuna concluded that he could likely not use his other copied techniques in Gojo's body, while already knowing prior that they could not be used simultaneously in his domain either, meaning Yuta's only other move would be to use purple. With this in mind, Sukuna went back on the offensive, desperate to not let Yuta charge up purple. However, with a well-timed blue, a recorder with Inamaki's cursed speech taped flew by and froze Sukuna in place, as Yuta then began to activate purple. Following the collapse of Yuta and Sukuna's barriers, Sukuna suffered minimum damage, noting that Yuta was not used to controlling purple as he watched the former, Todo and Yuji, confront him. While Todo was distracted from Yuta's sudden collapse, Sukuna wasted no time in hitting with Black Flash while breaking part of the Vibra Slap. Despite this, Todo swapped in Yuji, who struck the King of Curses, noting that Yuta's barrier shards were still flittering around without disappearing. After another swap, Sukuna was hit by Yuji's dismantle, which forced him into coughing up his fingers. The King of Curses grew concerned as the hit targeted the barrier between his and Megami's soul, and if those attacks kept hitting him, he would not be able to maintain control of his current body and would lose the fight. Sukuna changed tactics to simply avoid Yuji's attacks and continue fighting. However, while Sukuna expected there would be another swap from Todo, he was shocked that Hana Kurusu was swapped into the fight due to a Binding Vow range extension on Todo's end. The King of Curses was then hit with a maximum output Jacob's Ladder. However, Sukuna punched up some debris and acted on a plan to race up the debris to Hana's location. After recognizing that Jacob's Ladder's output was weaker than before, as well as Hana already being injured from their prior fight, Sukuna prepared to kill her and Angel by proxy with a Black Flash, before he could be stripped away from Megami's soul. Todo, however, protected Hana by taking the blow instead, impressing the King of Curses, the impact launching the pair into a building, leaving them both out of commission. Sukuna opted to finish off Hana later, but set his sights on Yuji, as the latter had chased him across the ladder's light. Yuji proceeded to strike and send Sukuna crashing into a building. Yuji then went to use Dismantle, but was punched away by the King of Curses' regrown fist. Due to the earlier two Black Flashes, Sukuna regained his reverse curse technique and proceeded to heal his left arms and prior injuries. Sukuna went to beat down on Yuji until his burnout technique could return. Yuji attempted to use Dismantle, but the King of Curses dodged it, recognizing that while it posed danger to him, it would at the same time be useless if it could never land. However, to his shock, Sukuna witnessed Yuji making the hand signs for a domain expansion and was ultimately hit by it. Sukuna awakened in the domain, which took on Yuji's memory of a train station, with Sukuna himself donning the appearance of the former. At the same time, he was greeted by Yuji to his confusion. As the two walked out of the station, Yuji explained that he conjured this domain setting in an attempt to communicate with Sukuna as the two walked about in the town Yuji grew up in. Yuji revealed to Sukuna he came back to this town to go to a funeral of his grandfather's friend. Yuji and Sukuna then walked into a park he used to play at, as he told the King of Curses mundane stories he had. Yuji then spotted hydrangea flowers and mistook them for morning glories, prompting Sukuna to insult and correct him. Yuji expressed surprise that Sukuna knew the names of different types of flowers, but the King of Curses brushed it off as a result of Megami's memories. When questioned on why he wasn't familiar with this town if he had access to Yuji's memories, Sukuna claimed he bothered not to check. Sukuna and Yuji came across another park that had crayfish, where Yuji challenged Sukuna to try catching one, which he accepted. Sukuna caught a bigger American crayfish, while Yuji caught a smaller yet rarer Japanese one, prompting the two to argue. Sukuna and Yuji then walked by a department store he went to when he was 5, and then walked to see the greenery of the town. Sukuna asked if there was a point to seeing any of these memories, but Yuji stated that there were a few places he wanted to go. One of the places was Kowai Farm, a place Wasuke took Yuji that had a horse stable. Yuji then told a story of when he threw up after eating too much ice cream spent with his allowance, prompting Sukuna to insult him. Yuji then took Sukuna with him to do archery, in which Sukuna won fairly easily due to the era he was from, saying it was only natural he'd be accustomed to it. The domain shifted to a winter memory as Yuji recounted memories of his youth in the winter. Sukuna finally had enough of these stories and memories and demanded Yuji to explain his intentions. Yuji began divulging his change in mindset, explaining that until recently Originally, he believed that life was about fulfilling a set role, and thought if he died fulfilling that role, it would be a proper death. But over time, he realized this was not the case, that simply living a mundane life, raising a family, walking a dog, and even isolating oneself with nothing to leave behind, there will still be value in the fragments of one's memory floating about that gives life its value. Yuji further stated that the way someone died did not matter, but rather it was the idea of someone treating those lives as worthless that he could not forgive. Yuji bluntly told Sukuna this was the reason why he hated him, and that human beings are not tools born with a predetermined role, be it good or bad. There's no fundamental answer as to what makes one human. Yuji finally explained that he brought Sukuna into his domain to show him the livelihood of the people the former sees no value in. Sukuna bluntly told Yuji he understood everything he was saying and yet felt no emotion or any real care. Ultimately, Yuji accepted his response, though Sukuna continued insulting Yuji as being spineless, questioning if his hatred really only amounted to this speech. However, Sukuna then realized that Yuji brought him into this domain as an act of pity, to which Yuji confirmed. He told the King of Curses that he can kill him inside of this domain, demanding that he release possession of Megami's soul as his life would be spared if he returned to Yuji as a vessel. Sukuna grew furious and declared that he would kill and sever Yuji's head and then kill everyone he cared for. Sukuna then cast Hollow Wicker Basket, thinking back to Gojo's method of rehabilitating the brain to reset burnt-out curse techniques, further thinking that while it was too risky to use it now with unlimited void still affecting him, as long as he continued using the hand signs for Hollow Wicker Basket, it would nullify the guaranteed hit of the domain and to reduce chances of it overpowering him. Sukuna then went on the offensive, trading blows with Yuji before punching him away. He admitted to the boy that he was surprised that Yuji's pity would be enough to rouse his anger, expressing with glee that he would kill countless humans in retaliation. However, due to Yuji's prior words to Megami's soul, the latter managed to regain enough control of the body to cast a shadow to hold Sukuna in place. Immediately realizing this was the work of Megami, the King of Curses was beaten back by Yuji. While grabbing hold of each other, the two traded rapid blows at each other's heads, with Sukuna ultimately being overpowered, realizing his reverse curse technique was not able to keep up with the punches and noting Hollow Wicker Basket a hit away from breaking. Ultimately, before Yuji could strike, Sukuna used Shrine to break apart Yuji's arm gauntlet by using Gojo's strategy for burnt out curse technique reset. But before the King of Curses could activate his own domain expansion, he was shocked when Yuji revealed the broken gauntlet was missing 2 fingers. As it turns out, Sukuna's curse techniques are etched into Yuji's body as he was once the host. Therefore, Sukuna's finger used to transfer into Megami was actually Yuji's, and there is also another one used to copy the conditions from Malevolent Shrine that was Yuji's. While continuing his fight with Yuji, Sukuna then feels the effects of Kugisaki's resonance. Caught off guard by this technique, Sukuna could not open his domain. With this, Yuji's can't miss attack. Taking advantage of this, Yuji uses Dismantle on Sukuna. Sukuna manages to get a counterattack in on Yuji. With them both wounded, they both go in for one more attack, but Yuji manages to use a double blow with Temporal Difference. This knocks Sukuna off guard enough for Yuji to land one more Black Flash right into his gut. And that is the life of Sukuna so far. Obviously, there are some updates that will be happening in short order, and we will find out how this all ends. Keep an eye out for that update video. Did you enjoy our video? Be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.